What's up, everybody? Andrew Cooper here, Alarm Fantasy Football. Next week, Howard Bender will be back joining me. After his long hiatus, he's been doing baseball boring stuff. But this week is special because we just had the NFL draft, and I get to bring on whoever I want. And for a topic like this, who better to bring in than our guy, Thor Nystrom, plugged in to college ball, which makes him extra plugged in for the NFL draft. So without further ado, Thor, what's up, brother?
Not a lot, man. Coop, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we're coming off a fun weekend. I'm not coming off much sleep the last couple of months, but that was a wild weekend. Certainly juiced me up. Lots of interesting landing spots. Lots of I would use a different word than interesting decisions made by some of those GMs while they were on the clock. But it was a fun, certainly first round, and then entire weekend. We got the lots of trades as well. So excited to talk about it with you.
Absolutely, man. I've been checking out your show. For those that haven't, you got to check out the Fantasy Pros Dynasty show with Thor and Derek Brown. They they beat up Pat Fitz and the guys. Finally got their way, right? Because you guys have wanted that show for a while, and we've needed it, man. I mean, you guys got all these takes, man. You're plugged in this whole time. It was about time you guys got a show, man. So just real quick before we get into it, let everybody know what you guys have been doing over there. And I mean, I've really enjoyed it, dude, especially culminating with the draft.
Oh, dude, thank you so much. Yeah, so it's on the Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast feed, the Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show that I did with Derek Brown over the spring, and we're good. We just put out our draft grades, and then we're gonna for the last episode of the season next week, we're gonna do UDFA class rankings because that's the thing I'm working on now. So I'm excited about that, and we'll get for the our fantasy players, of course, out there. We'll get into the weeds there with some deep sleepers, which was one of the funner things to do on that show. Like on conventional draft shows, you hit the treetops. It's like, we're going to talk about Marvin Harrison. We're going to talk about Roma Dunze. We're going to talk about neighbors, stuff like that. But that show, it afforded us the ability to get deeper than that. And I feel like during the spring, February, March, it's important to get that stuff out there, especially for people that are able to monetize that information or make actionable decisions on that information. There are people that are in drafts before the draft, and you're able to pick off these guys that are crazy undervalued assets in those drafts, or just get on top of it. As far as their leagues go, get that kind of intel. So we were banging the drum for some of these different guys that we were excited where they went, or they went way higher than people were talking about all spring. One of the guys that I could not shut up about all spring was Luke McCaffrey, who, when he came into the process, people saw him as a 7th rounder at UDFA, and I just could not shut up about him. I was like, no, he's going way higher than that. The Commanders ended up taking him, I think, within 4 or 5 slots of where he was on my big board. Might have surprised some people how high he went, but like I said, that was exactly how I saw him. Kamani Vidal was another guy that we were going nuts about. I'm sure we'll get more into Kamani a little bit later this show, but yeah, it was crazy stoked where he went. That was also not only a good situation, but a very, very interesting fit for reasons that we can get into later. But yeah, appreciate the shout out on that. It was a very fun show to do.
Yeah, and that's why we have you on, man. And I got to say that, out here in the modern fantasy landscape, you've got Devi, you've got Campus to Kin, you've got people that are just straight up pushing their rookie drafts before the draft because they want to take advantage of the research and the effort put in. And you also have best ball, right? People forget that in these best ball leagues with the taxi squads and the 40-man rosters, I mean, I'm digging deep. I got some crazy people added. And, I follow your lead. When I put out my wide receiver article this week, I've been called a filthy casual by Reddit enough times, when you go out and say, oh, here are my sleepers. And they're like, dude, sleepers, those guys got picked easily in my 70-player draft, right? So you got to go deep cuts. And we'll get into that today. What we're going to do today, real quick, I want to hit on some news, and there's not much. So we'll just breeze through that. And then what I want to do is put you on the spot as if you're in a draft, right? So there's some hot spots within the draft. A lot of people are just doing Caleb Williams, one super flex. But for the most part, when you have a draft, you only have a few picks. You can trade, move around a little bit, but it's kind of rigid. You have to make a decision. And I think that's something that's going to help people to hear, okay, I'm going to go to Thor and say, okay, you're on the spot. These guys are gone. These are your best options. Where are you going? Because at the end of the day, you can't just get all these guys. You can't have them all. So that's what we'll do today. Want to give a shout out to the people in the chat hanging out. Mile High Luke, Charlene, Toronto Dave, always in here. What's happening, Rex? Everybody, thank you guys for popping in. Make sure to hit like and subscribe to hang out with us. So, real quick on the news, stop me when there's anything interesting. But I mean, Zeke Elliott signed. Are you taking advantage in best ball, or are you? I mean, is there any world where he cracks your lineups on teams where you're competing? What do you feel about that?
Oh, sorry.
So I was saying Zeke Elliott signing. I mean, is he cracking dynasty spots? Is he a best ball draft? What do you feel about Zeke signing with the Cowboys?
I can't believe that they're going to go into next season with him as an RB1. And going back to the drafting, I cannot believe they didn't take a running back. I have been told that that their round 3 pick was where they were sniffing around that if there was a guy that they like. So that tells me that that they had a very, very, very microscopic list of running backs that they were considering. Which, okay, great. Like, it's like, okay, I get that it's not the best running back class, but it's like Cowboys, you have more picks than that, and it's like your running back room is in dire straits as well. And we've seen Zeke the past couple of years. Does that look like a guy? Does he acquit himself from what you've seen on game film as a guy who's gonna step into the DeLorean and turn back the clock to 6 years ago? So I mean, like, am I buying him early? No, because I do not expect him to be RB1 by week 1 for a contending team. I think that would be suicide.
The Patriots last year, essentially, because of the way things shook out, they made him the focal point of the offense, right? And we saw what that looked like, and it looked like 3 yards of carry. So yeah, maybe in your best ball draft, but it's crazy. They got to make some sort of trade. When they traded back in the first to pick up extra capital, I was like, here we go. Right?
Yeah.
Somebody. And we'll talk about some of them, but dude, I kind of like, you mentioned Kamani Vidal. There's a bunch of guys that went later. You got to at least get somebody, and they did none of that. So we'll have to see. Beyond that, Zay Jones released. Doesn't matter. Boston Scott to the Rams. I mean,
Coop, I have to break in. Your tweet yesterday about Brian Thomas, where Zay Jones is saying hi to him, and then the guy Brian Thomas snaps his fingers and he goes to us, was absolutely hilarious.
Sometimes, man. Sometimes when I go to send those, my finger hovers over the button, and I'm like, should I send this? And then I think to myself, Zay Jones is a multimillionaire. I can send this to you, right? You know what I mean? He's doing just fine. I can send this one, but that was that was one of those. You know what? Let's just move on and get to the dynasty stuff. That's what people came for here. Last thing from the news, I just wanted to say real quick that thank you everybody that got involved with the Reddit contest with the Scott Fish Bowl. Thank you, Thor and Fantasy Pros. You guys super supportive. You donated draft guides and everything that people got in there. We had so much support from both sides. We had all these draft guides and jerseys to give away, and then so many people donated. We were shooting, I didn't know if we were going to get a couple $100 or whatever. We were shooting for 2,000. We got the 5,000. So shout out to everybody.
Nice.
$5,000 for Fantasy Cares. Go check out on Reddit. The post is up there. I think it's pinned with all the winners. So shout out on that. Let's get to the meat and potatoes here. The reason you bring a guy like Thor on. Dynasty rookie draft week this week. People are going to be on the clock, and in your mind, you're going to, it's like, oh, I'm going to take this guy here, that guy there. Things go crazy. And sometimes you end up at the board with multiple guys you like, or you end up in a spot where you can't trade out and you just got to take somebody. So let me hit you with a couple spots here. First one that I'm seeing a lot of, and it's a decision people have to make. Let's say you've got a kind of a neutral build, right? You're kind of well-rounded, kind of in the middle of the pack, ready to compete. Caleb Williams goes, right? And this is a super flex league. If Thor is on the clock, are you taking Marvin Harrison Jr. or are you taking Jaden Daniels?
I'm taking Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, I think, enters the NFL, and people are going to see this very quickly. He will immediately be one of the 5 most dangerous out-of-the-pocket runners at that position that we've ever seen. He does it a little bit of a different way than Lamar Jackson does. Jackson's more the twitchy guy, hard to get your hands on when he leaves the pocket, starts running. Whereas Daniels is the slingshot forward. He just shoots out of the pocket so fast, accelerates so fast, and then it's the speed thing. It would have been really fun to watch him run during the pre-draft process. He clearly did not need to go number 2 overall, so his agents earned their paycheck and gave him the correct advice. But just for my entertainment value, everyone else's entertainment value out there, I wish he would have done it, because he would have run a stupid 40 with a stupid 10-yard split. But you have that, and then obviously his other superpower, it's that downfield, downtown throwing, not just the arm strength, but the touch on that. That combination of his, it reminds me of Randall Cunningham. That was my comp for him. And he's gotten so much better in the pocket, just as a regular thrower outside of that, going through the progressions, sensing the pass rush around him, and waiting until the last second before he pulls that ball down, tucks, and then shoots out of the pocket. But that rushing utility in particular is what's going to make him a monster in fantasy. And in super flex leagues, where the quarterbacks, that is an asset. It's so it's a finite resource. That guy is going to be gold.
Yeah, I mean, I pulled a stat. I looked at every quarterback drafted since 2000, right? And I looked at the guys that had a season with 80 carries over either their first or second year, right? Which is 4 or 5 carries a game. It's nothing crazy, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen have had over 100 basically every year. And there were 15 players that did that. 14 of them finished top 10, at least in one of those seasons. The only one that didn't was Tim Tebow. So unless we get
shout out to Tebow,
man, it's another insane needle for that person to thread. But everybody else, even Vince Young finished 9. You know what I mean? So even if the throwing's not quite there, like, Josh Allen as a rookie, 52% completion percentage, doesn't matter. So I'm with you on that. The next one here, and I think I know where you are on this one, but just to make sure, I've had a lot of people that before the draft said, whoever the Vikings take, I'm taking. So for you, when you say those guys are gone, and I'll even say, the wide receivers, and let's say Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers, Jonathan Brooks, all those guys are gone too. And you're sitting there looking at Drake May or JJ McCarthy. How do you play
it? People who know my work definitely know where I'm going with this. It's definitely McCarthy for me. It's prior to the draft. I mean, like, look at my board. I got McCarthy 3rd on my board. I got May 8th. I was higher on McCarthy than most. Obviously, was pounding the drum for him all process long, going back to January, and was a little bit lower on May. It's not to say that May, the ceiling with Drake May, I think I see that pretty similarly to other people. I think the reason that I was a little bit lower on him is acknowledging the risk in his profile. There's things that need to be worked on with him. I say weeds in his game that need to be pulled out early. So I would exercise patience with him initially, but that's what elevates the risk profile. And I had to bump him down a little bit. Right. McCarthy's floor is way higher than people were giving him. We're discussing it as. Like, people are like, oh, he's gonna bust and all. It's like, I don't know about that. Like, looking at his profile, and feel free to clip this in 5 years, make me look like an idiot. I don't see, if watching that kid's profile with the tools, everything like that, I don't see how he's not at least an average NFL starter. At worst, I don't. That's what I didn't get about the discourse around him. It's like, so you have that, and then I think his ceiling is way higher than people were depicting as well. So I see JJ McCarthy as the better prospect than Drake May, and the situation differential between the two, it's a much bigger discrepancy in McCarthy's favor. So to me, that is an easy decision. Give me McCarthy all day.
You don't think Demario Douglas and they're not
and
on
that
the same level
ludicrous
as
pick of Jalen Polk. It's like guys, Drake. So okay, I just give me 1 second on this one. I mean, Drake May. So the Drake May hive would argue with me about this. So I'm coming. Understand the context where I'm coming from is like the last 3 months of this nonsense. But my whole thing with Drake May was, what he did was he shredded the ACC in 2022 for the first 10 games. He started 10-game stretch in the most Mickey Mouse offense that we have in college football, the Phil Longo thing, which is not translatable to the NFL, with Josh Downs and Antoine Green. And then Longo goes to Wisconsin with Luke Fickell right after that. And the 2 receivers go to the NFL. And so, and by the way, at the end of that season, when all of those guys were still there, they get upset by Georgia Tech. Drake May stunk in that game. Then they get upset by NC State. Drake May stunk in that game. Then they lose their last 2 games as well. So they lose these 4 straight games down the stretch. And Drake May was terrible down the stretch. So that was in 2022. Then you flip it to 2023, and those guys go out the door. And all I heard all spring from the Drake May hivers, it was, well, the contact, the situation was bad for him. Like, look at his supporting cast. And, that's the reason why he regressed in 2023. And it's like, okay, well, how do you explain the last 4 games of 2022? Where the Georgia Tech team that came in 4-7, where like it was like he was seeing ghosts the entire time, couldn't get out of his own way. And then the next week against NC State, they drop 8, and it's like he had landed on the moon. He was playing the position for the first time. And their whole argument with Drake May is the supporting cast, which fair enough. If it is the supporting cast, and that is what Drake May's most ardent supporters claim that he needs to succeed, which is the argument that I heard over and over again. Right. Patriots, guys, now you're on the clock to begin Friday. You have the shot to take Mr. Ladd McConkey there. There was several other.
They had the pick.
Oh, God. Several other awesome receiver prospects there, and you skip down so that you could take Jalen Polk, a guy who, when Jalen McMillan was healthy at Washington, Jalen Polk was so far the distant wide receiver 3 on that. He was an afterthought. Every time Jalen McMillan was healthy and active for a game, look at the stats. The only time that Jalen Polk went nuts at Washington, it was this 5 to 6 game stretch immediately after Jalen McMillan went down. So the Patriots draft was.
I got to tell you this. I mentioned this to you that before the draft, I have Brandon Huffman on. I have him on every year because he's a great scout, legendary in the space. And I asked him, I said, tell me, give me, because every year he talks to these guys, he's got boots on the ground, and he gives me a guy that he's like, this guy above everything, forget the metric, size, anything. This guy has that extra level, the compete level. The kids these days would say he's got the dog in him or whatever. And he's giving me guys like Josh Downs and Luke Musgrave or whatever. And I asked him, and this year he had one name, just one. And he said Jalen McMillan. And I said, better than Polk. And he's like, yep, I got him at a Polk. And of course, my Patriots then reach for Polk. Like I have this guy on. I'm all fired up. I'm like, McMillan, that's our dude. And then, they trade back slightly to justify their reach, which that's like the pump fake in when you shoot a 3 and you pump fake it, you never hit that 3 afterwards. And we see that time and time again. I worry with the Bills doing that too, that they're like, you get locked on this guy and you try to justify your reach. And at the end of the day, there's probably a reason why, that guy was there. So,
for sure.
And just people got to keep in mind, like I have Drake May ahead of McCarthy in my rankings, but at the end of the day, what we're doing first and foremost is figuring out who can be an NFL quarterback or not, because the hit rates are not good, right? Like we're talking 50% at best. And as you saw with like the Trevor Lawrence class, it was Trevor Lawrence and then nobody. Everyone was arguing about Zach Wilson versus the ceiling of Trey Lance. It turned out, who cares? So we have to first and foremost predict who's going to actually even be an NFL quarterback. So completely understand the take. All right, next one up here that I have a lot of people running into. Let's say all the QBs are gone. Neighbors is gone. Harrison's gone. Jonathan Brooks is gone. You're sitting at a tight end premium league, and you got Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers on the board. And again, neutral build, so just best player available for you. Which way are you going?
This is probably going to be maybe a scandalous take. I'm not sure. I haven't heard as many of the fantasy rankings like out there yet. But for me, this one's pretty easy. I'm going with Brock Bowers. Yes. Brock Bowers is a mega stud, and I hear so many casual takes about him on Twitter. One thing I would advise for people out there that haven't seen Brock Bowers yet, and you're being clever on Twitter with your comments, maybe just wait until September, because that guy's about to show you the same thing that he showed on his college campus when he arrived at Georgia. As a true freshman, they have this receiving core where it's like, they had George Pickens and they had all these other NFL receivers. Of course, Ladd McConkey was there. I'm trying to pull. Okay, so they had George Pickens, A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Jermaine Burton, Kyrus Jackson, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint. They had another NFL tight end in their tight end room, Darnell Washington. Right. The running back was an NFL pass catching guy in James Cook. Brock Bowers walks onto that team right out of the college prom, and leads it in receiving as a true freshman, a team that won the national title game, a dominant team. So as a true freshman, so he's a first-team All-American that season. Then he does it again the next season, again, a first-team All-American. And then he does it again this past season, even though this past season he was playing compromise for a decent portion of it and was held to 10 games. Because he had to get tightrope surgery during the season. Any other player, I think, by the way, would have shut the thing down. He rushes back, gets that tightrope surgery so he can rush back because Georgia was still undefeated. He wanted to play in the SEC title game to try to get the three-peat. And, of course, Georgia loses a close decision to Alabama, and that ends up not happening. But this is a guy, again, you step into this colossus of a program that ends up winning the national title 2 of the 3 seasons that you're there. That was chock full of NFL talent at the pass catching positions. And you were the dude from day one. You first team All-American all 3 of those seasons. I think you won the Mackey
twice.
Two of those 3 seasons. And it's not only that, the other thing people need to realize about him, because I know people, one other take I heard out there was like, oh, Kyle Pitts and, let's be afraid of Brock Bowers. They're totally different players. Kyle Pitts is like he's more of like your jumbo downfield receiver guy who's like too big for that. So he's called a tight end. He's the seam stretcher guy. And that's what they did with him at Florida. They chuck it up and no one in the SEC was as big as he was or could get as high as he was. So he would win downfield all the time. That's not Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is a yard gainer. He's a ball advancer and you can do it whatever way you want, but typically he's getting the ball either short or intermediate. And then he's just going berserker, breaking the tackles and getting the yak yardage after that. But speaking to, I sort of refer to him as a Debo of tight ends. And you saw the way that Georgia used him like this. If you look at just his carries in campus, so he had 19 carries. They gave him 19 carries over three seasons. Like they had some fun with him. They could have done it more, but so the 19 carries, he converts into 193 yards, which is 10.2 yards per carry and 5 touchdowns. Wow. Kirby Smart said if they had ever switched him to running back during those seasons, he would have been the starting running back on the team, Brock Bowers. So people need to realize like what this kid is bringing into the NFL, and there will be no slow acclimation that you generally see with the tight end because Brock Bowers is not a tight end. Like the terms of like offensive weapon and those sorts of things, like I sort of cringe when they're used, but like those things are more descriptively accurate when applied to Brock Bowers than the designation of tight end. You can line up Brock Bowers anywhere and he can do anything for you. Georgia did it already. Again, a team that was chock full of NFL players and was winning titles while he was there.
Right. He's a superstar. That's why it didn't matter, what team took him because when you have a guy like that, you're just going to manufacture touches for him and you're going to find places to use him. And he's a wide receiver that's better at blocking than every wide receiver in the league, which is what we see from Mark Andrews and Evan Engram. Like you don't take those guys out. People dog Evan Engram for his blocking, but when you compare him to a slot wide receiver, he's tremendous at blocking, right?
For sure.
And just to wrap it up on your Kyle Pitts point, I mean, Kyle Pitts at 1,000 yards, the only tight end ever to have 1,000 yards at 21 years old. So, I mean, I'm not sure what people are upset about if his quarterback changed, right? Like, so, I'm in, man. I'm with you on that. So, let's get one more from the first round, and then we'll get into some deeper ones here. All right, let's say all those guys are gone, and you're looking at, and we'll even hype because I know you could draft wide receivers for days. So, we'll suggest that it's gone wide receiver heavy, and the true best available players at this stage in a Superflex league are Bo Nix or Jonathan Brooks. What direction are you going?
Jonathan Brooks, easy. We could play the game where you keep tossing names at me next to Bo Nix and to see where I finally say Bo Nix. It would be I'm not sure where we would get there. Jonathan Brooks, easy. At least this allows me to talk about Jonathan Brooks. I think Jonathan Brooks is probably, I would assume, is going to be seen as underrated initially here. Very good landing spot for Jonathan Brooks heading to Carolina. Because you're gonna get all the usage there. That thing is wide open. It was the other, it was that, and it was Dallas. And there were so few of them where it was just wide open. And if they're one of the teams that is one of the first 3 to take the running back, it's wheels up for that dude. That's Jonathan Brooks. The one thing that I'll be interested in with him, heading to the NFL, like as a runner, I like Jonathan Brooks, and certainly he's going to get a metric ton of touches in that regard. The passing game stuff, I'm more interested to see how much they use him as a receiver. But either way, the amount of touches he gets as a runner, it's going to justify it. So yeah,
and I will say this on that is that led so many people, that exact like issue you just mentioned led so many people to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Jonathan Taylor. And you know what I mean? At the end of the day, does Jonathan Taylor get 100 targets? No. Does it matter? No. So if the guy's good enough to be a starting running back, then I don't care. So I'm in with you on that. And what we'll do moving forward is for each group moving forward, just assume Bo Nix is in there. And you have the you have the ability to select Bo Nix at any point moving forward if you so choose. Let's get into this next group. I think this is pretty interesting. And for this one, I'm going to give you 4 names and have you pick one, though, of course, feel free to expound on any of these players if you choose. So at the end of the first, you had a couple teams trading up a little bit to get their guy. And you also had the second round start with 2 wide receivers going right off the rip, one of which, of course, was traded up for the Chargers. My Patriots didn't take Ladd, Julian Edelman, McCarthy when they should have. So let's say you're on the clock here, and the best available wide receivers are Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman, and Ladd McConkey. Who does Thor pull the trigger on?
This one is close. Is this PPR? Is this like regular?
So let's say it's full PPR.
Okay.
For the entire. Well, let me ask you, like, what format do you prefer? I was saying super.
I like
flex,
PPR. So we'll say PPR.
Full PPR,
yeah.
super flex, tight end premium, and of course, Bo Nix is available as well.
When Thor's on the clock, he'll be available one slot later every time. Okay. I promise you. So in full PPR, that's where it gets close for me between Keon Coleman and Ladd McConkey for the top one. I still think I'm gonna ever so slightly side with Keon Coleman in this one, merely because of the offensive, and even though I think McConkey going to be the wide receiver 1 there from the get. And I do think he's gonna have a ton of catches there, but just because of the constitution of the Harbaugh offense, you know, I wonder how many yards and touchdowns are going to be accrued for McConkey. That's why I got to go with Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman, very interesting eval, and you know he was one of the top guys that was arguments on both sides of him during the process. There's a lot of context to keep in mind with him, and I think that's where the arguments sort of started to get lost with people. You know, like he ran the 4.61, so people are like, he's a bum athlete. And, you know, I was sort of like, how can a kid be a bum athlete when 2 years ago he was on Tom Izzo's basketball team at Michigan State? And you see him hurdling defenders after the catch on his film. So it's like, you know, and then, of course, jumping over them and posterizing them downfield. You know, that's the other thing that he does. His ball skills are really, really good. And he was targeted more, had more usage and the statistical profile than Jaden Reed his last year at Michigan State. So something to keep in mind with that. Then last season, the Florida State situation was just super wonky when Jordan Travis and Keon Coleman were both healthy at the same time. That's when Keon Coleman looked like a first-round pick. Start of the season, he lights up LSU, 9 catches, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then he lights up Clemson, 5 catches, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was averaging 77 yards and almost a touchdown and a half per game in the 7 games through October. If you take out the one game against Boston College where they were playing in this 30-mile-per-hour like wind, you know, storm, whatever. But then Jordan Travis's injury happens, and Keon Coleman got injured as well in November. He missed the game. Then he comes back. Travis snaps his ankle, and that's where things went absolutely crazy with that. The Florida State's backup quarterbacks were a travesty last year. It's the explicit reason that the CFP committee decided to go off the grid and do something to them that they'd never done, leave out an undefeated Power 5 team because their backup quarterback play was so ghastly. They would have lost 80-0 in the first round of the CFP. Right. Nobody wanted to watch that. But the key point with Keon Coleman last season, and this is a stat that helps to isolate the terrible quarterback play that he had in November from the rest of it. 87 targets for Keon Coleman last season in 2023. Only 55 of them were charted as catchable. Okay. So consider how many throws were made his way that were And Keon Coleman's a big dude with a big catch radius. That is a lot of throws his way, 32, that were not deemed catchable by the generous folks at PFF. But anyway, of those 55 catchable targets, Keon Coleman caught 50 of them. 11 went for touchdowns. 28 other ones went for first downs. That's what the Buffalo Bills care about. They obviously have the wide open outside receiver spot for him to step right into. His game goes really well with Josh Allen. The thing that concerned you about Keon Coleman is if he was going to go to a team where it was like the intermediate thing, efficiency, like timing concepts and stuff like that, because he doesn't create separation. In fact, last year, not a typo, he was in the 0th percentile PFF for separation rate. The reason why he's so good anyway, the utility, it's going down the field, and then it's the contested catch thing. For people out there, the eval, it's very reminiscent of T. Higgins, who won in the exact same way at Clemson. It was like, I'm not trying to shake you along the route. You know where I'm going. I know where I'm going. So I'll see you down the field. The quarterback's going to toss it up, and we'll see if you can get higher than me. And they couldn't. And that ended up translating to the NFL. Now there's guys like this that do end up busting. Of course. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside would be a good example of this. But Kelvin Benjamin, good example of this. Right. But there's also guys like this that succeed, and Cortland Sutton would be another ish example of that. And they always end up going in the second round. But Keon Coleman's a guy that more or less I was bullish on, where as a second round type prospect. And now I'm really bullish on him because he just went to Buffalo, where Josh Allen just rears back and that's what Keon Coleman does. There's nothing else about Keon Coleman that I want, except for you go downfield and then you jump higher than someone else. Show me what you did when you were on Tom Izzo's basketball team. Get up high. No one can get higher than you. And his hands are really, really good. So all you got to do is get him in that one-on-one situation. There are not many human beings alive one-on-one, stranded on that island way, way downfield, 60, 70 yards downfield, that are going to be able to get higher than Keon Coleman and battle him for that ball.
Exactly. And I picture what Drake London did in the NFL last year, which
great
was
example as well.
Targets were bad, right? He doesn't crack 1,000 yards, but he leads the league in contested catches. Like, he's playing on hard mode, right? Yeah. And I feel like, because when you watch this guy, I get where people say the reason people say bum athlete or that he doesn't have something is because he's not polished the way some of these other guys are, that he still needs to learn some of the tricks, right? Like, he's just brute forcing his way through. And we've seen that before in the NFL too. An example being Demaryius Thomas, who was all athleticism, right? And he couldn't get out of his own way, right?
That was a deep cut. I like that.
Yeah. He couldn't get, rest in peace, but he couldn't get out of his own way early in his career. He was just like, just pure athleticism. And then once he figured it out and he learned the tricks and he learned how to get a little separation and add to his bag, that's when you saw 1,500 yards. Obviously, adding Peyton Manning helped a little bit there. But we have Josh Allen, right? And with guys like this, I look at him and say, okay, boy, we have a super volatile player, risk versus reward. And this is where the draft comes in for guys like you and me. It gives us permission to take these guys. If he had fallen to day 3, to the 4th round, now all the scary stuff, we look at it and say, boy, it looks like the scary side might have won out a little bit. But in this case, the Bills looked at him and said, we'll polish this right up and we're going to look great here. So I love it. And same thing with like DK Metcalf fell for similar concerns too, right? The second round, and it hit. When it's bad, it's bad. And you get N'Keal Harry or whatever. But when it's good, my goodness, is it good. So
1,000%. Yeah, people need to look back at DK Metcalf, the agility testing, which is why he fell down there. And that was the whole thought, is like, this guy will never be able to win in the intermediate area. And in the NFL, they're always going to know it's just north-south. So how is he going to catch anything? You can just sit back on it. It's just one trick utility. Well, we see if your one trick is neat enough, you're going to win even on the biggest stage in the world. So, and Keon Coleman's got one trick that is pretty neat.
Right. I mean, we've seen plenty of one-trick guys, different tricks, of course, but like, Wes Welker just running that arrow route, like, or, the timing routes, like he just, it's like, if you can figure out how to beat somebody one way, Santana Moss, just run by everybody. You know what I mean? It's like, if you can figure out how to beat somebody one way, well, that can be pretty valuable. So
for sure.
I like it. And then you, just real quick on this, Ladd McConkey, out of those 4, so again, for those just joining us, I put him on the clock with Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, best available, in a full PPR, he went with Keon Coleman. But let's say you were able to trade back up. Is it McCarthy next or one of the other guys?
Definitely McConkey. Yeah, McConkey is underrated. He was underrated during the process, and I imagine the fantasy people are gonna, he's gonna be underrated with them too. It wasn't a surprise to me that Harbaugh was like, go and get that kid. The separation with him it is stupid. Like if he had to say one trick for everyone, his Lad McConkey, it's the opposite of they're literally the inverse of each other.
Yeah.
Lad McConkey is shaking you. One guy man coverage, you're not staying with Lad McConkey. So that's what happens. That's why the efficiency numbers are so stupid. I had one crazy stat I had in my my write up on McConkey that I couldn't believe. I was looking back. So here's the stat. This is one of the craziest stats that I pulled on the entire class last year. So last season, more than 80% of the balls that went his way. So just rote throws that went his way. I'm not talking catchable targets. I'm just any ball that was thrown his direction out of the quarterback's hands. More than 80% of them were completed to Lad McConkey. Yes.
And just anywhere, just thrown anywhere.
Yeah, that were considered targets in his direction. Yeah,
wow.
So more than 80% were completed. And this is a guy 3.26 yards per route run. Last season, that was number 4 among FBS receivers, and he wasn't getting this. It wasn't like the Malachi Corley like spoon fed type targets. His 12.2 ADOT was the exact Lad McConkey's 12.2 ADOT was the exact same as Malik Neighbors is. He's just the high efficiency chain mover guy. And when people out there, you wonder why was Jim Harbaugh attracted to him? I'll tell you why. Because the Harbaugh offense, you think about it, just take last year for example. You run on the early downs. People they harp too much on that in the pre-draft process. That's what you do on early downs, but what that makes is that the high leverage downs, the third down, it makes it crucially important. You can't play that style of offensive football unless you are convinced we will be able to convert 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 4, right, those downs at a rate much higher than everybody else. And that's obviously what Jim Harbaugh reasoned last year. That is what he is doing, putting together by taking a guy like Lad McConkey. This is the dude on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 is going to get open, and he's going to get hit on the hands by Herbert right beyond the sticks, right? They're just going to keep nicking people with paper cuts, not turning the ball over, controlling the clock. It's probably going to annoy NFL fans, but Charger fans who have been stuck watching that dope Staley or the guy, whoever that guy was that they just got out of there the last couple of years are going to be thrilled with it because you finally have an adult with a plan who is running the offensive usage and everything like that. And Lad McConkey is going to be a key part of that.
Yeah, to put that 80% number in perspective, that's even slightly better than Michael Thomas during the death by 1,000 cuts slant era. Like that, he would think he was at 78%. So dude catches everything. And then the part of the process that had me chuckling the most is how many people had Julian Edelman as the comp, which I think is the right comp, but they had it for the wrong reasons. Like when you get the right answer to the test, but you don't know how you got there, right? Because people kept saying like, oh, he's just a white slot guy. But Edelman wasn't that. Edelman would play 500 snaps at flanker, right? Like he would play out wide, he would play inside, and he would move the sticks, which is, we like to get it deep in the numbers and the weeds, but there's 2 things that teams care about: first downs and touchdowns, right? That's it. So moving the sticks is the most important thing, and a huge correlation between, first downs and yards, first downs per route run and all those things. So yeah. I'm in on McConkey. My dad was in on McConkey, and we're sitting here looking at Jalen Polk. So I don't know. Let's move on. I want to give you another set here, and again, keep in mind Bo Nix still on the board available. But let's say that whole wave of wide receivers goes, and now we're looking at and Trey Benson also is gone. I'm not going to give you that one. The next group here, we're looking at Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, and Bucky Irving, and you're on the clock.
I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with Corum here. This one's tougher though because the landing spots aren't great.
Debro, he had me so sold on Marshawn Lloyd, and the Green Bay spot kind of hurts a little bit, man. I know that's his baby. I had him on the show like a month and a half or so, a month or so ago.
It's a tough landing spot there. And also with Marshawn Lloyd's game, he didn't play on passing downs at either of the two USCs that he played at, so he needs to steal the early down work from those two other dudes above him.
Freight trains too.
Yeah, good luck with that. We'll see, but I like Marshawn Lloyd as well. Packers took him just about exactly where he was on my board, but that's a tough landing spot. Jalen Wright, I was able to talk myself into that landing spot in advance because the Dolphins I'm talking about, because I had been told earlier on in April that the Dolphins were all over him, where it was the team that was by far showing the most interest in him during the process was talking to him, just all over him, sniffing all over his eval, different stuff like that. And which initially surprised me. And it's like, why are they showing that? Why are they doing this much amount of advanced work on Wright based on their running back room and odd chain and all that different stuff? But the more I thought about it, by the time we got around to the draft, I talked to some more people, and it made way more sense to me between injury insurance for odd chain, but also as the perfect complement to odd chain, where Mike McDaniel, his prerogative of having that world-class speed on the field at all times at that position has now been realized. What I believe is going to happen is Wright will be the passing down dude initially. Wright's a good receiver. Wright is a very good pass blocker. That is how they are going to mitigate the amount of snaps and touches for Devin Achane. You have to keep Achane, around 12 per game. If you start going above that, that's where you start putting yourself at risk for Devin Achane to break. And you don't want to do that when you consider yourself a contender that could potentially be playing more than 17 games. So, but yeah, I got to go with Blake Corum here. The other ones that I don't think are attractive initially. Blake Corum, I think he takes most of the early down stuff from Kyren Williams. I think Kyren Williams, he's going to be on the field for the passing down stuff, but I think that the Corum pick really hurts him on the early downs. And I think this is another one. I don't think this is a referendum on Kyren Williams by the Rams. I think it's another one where in their head, the way that they're thinking about this, it's almost an insurance policy where you're getting a guy that mixes and matches really well with him, number one, and you increase the odds that Kyren Williams remains healthy for the entirety of the season. Obviously, Kyren Williams is a small dude, but then Blake Corum, I think, is the better early down runner. Kyren Williams very clearly is the better passing down guy than Blake Corum. So I think that's the way that ends up shaking out. And because it's a good offense, because I think Blake Corum is walking to the best opportunity initially here, I got to go with Blake Corum.
Yeah, and it's a pillar of their offense, right? Like they looked at it, it worked great, and they said, "This is great. We want more of this." It's the reason the Ravens keep drafting tight ends. People are like, "Why do they need Isaiah Likely?" Well, we saw last year exactly why you have Isaiah Likely. If you're going to have one guy be 30% of your offense, then you need to have a plan if that guy gets hurt. You know what I mean? So it makes all the sense in the world. So yeah, I'm in on Corbin. Not to mention Kyren. You mentioned the early downs. Kyren did struggle at times on pass downs, and Blake Corum didn't let up a sack over the last 2 years in school. Now, part of that, of course, is the offense. And, McCarthy getting the ball out early and crisply, but still, something to keep in mind there. So I'm with you on Corum there. And yeah, I would have liked to see some different landing spots. It's the way it goes. And again, we watched Alvin Kamara when he was drafted, third round pick, behind Adrian Peterson and Mark Ingram. And we thought he was buried, not as buried. I feel he felt more buried than behind Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. So for me, I'm just drafting talent as well. So I'm with you on right. Okay, let's get this next. Oh, did you have something to add there? Or?
No, for sure. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So this next group, dude, this is really why we need you. This group here, because I look at this group and maybe you have a strong opinion, but this is kind of tough territory for me. So I take, and you might even have some of these wide receivers ahead of the other ones. I know that you, the way you do things, man, you've got deep cuts, deep dives, and you're not afraid to go with your guy. I like this group here, and you can pick one or two if you want. I'll let you trade up. But I'm looking at like Adonai Mitchell, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, Troy Franklin. We know you're probably not going to take Jalen Polk. And then I'll throw Roman Wilson in there too, a guy that I personally like. So of that crew, and that's based on ADP in the last 3 or so days. So those are the guys kind of going as well. Of that crew, who's your number one? Who are you snagging?
Definitely Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall
Okay.
is a stud. The last 3 years, he was wide receiver 1 for Jaden Daniels at Arizona State, then Anthony Richardson in Florida, then Graham Mertz, of course, at Florida last year. He is an amazing route runner. You see that on his film. His hands are absolutely filthy. People that haven't seen the highlight reel of his catches, look it up right now. His catch against Charlotte was maybe – I don't want to say the best catch I've ever seen, but it's the best college catch I've ever seen, and probably a top 3 catch that I've ever seen, period. I can't say I got the poster of the Jefferson catch against the Bills over there. So it started to look at me when I started to say the best catch I've ever seen. You know, Jefferson's like Thor.
A couple of those catches, a couple of those catches kind of ruined everything. Like the Odell catch is just like, like that.
When I said top 3,
that's what I mean.
Those are the 2 I was thinking of. Those are the only 2 catches that I can put up against that thing that he did against Charlotte, which just defied. And he got crushed when he caught it, which made it even crazier. But you have that stuff. Then he proved the concept of the Senior Bowl. I didn't need to see that, but where he really, for me, and he ended up being a first rounder on my board, where he punched that ticket was in Indianapolis, and I talked to him down in Mobile. We had a nice little interview. I wish I could go back and do the Shaquille O'Neal. Apologies, I wasn't familiar with your athletic testing game.
Yeah.
Like the rest of his game, I was totally familiar with it. I was a fanboy of Ricky Pearsall, but the testing, I didn't think he was going to test as a friggin' 99th percentile athlete doing the full gamut of testing. It's like, Ricky, come on, stop hurting him out there. So like you toss all that stuff in, it's like, all right, heading into the process, I thought this is the prototypical round 2 receiver for his phylum. You do all that stuff, destroying the pre-draft process, and then with the testing, it's like, all right, then you got to give him the benefit of the doubt too. He was in some bad passing environments, so and then the 49ers getting him. You kidding me? If they trade one of them receivers that they got, especially, it's going to get wild there for Ricky Pearsall real quick. He is used to being the wide receiver 1 going back up, a while. He's going to be just fine being the wide receiver 2, be in the advantageous position with that.
And people got to understand with that offense, with the wide receiver 2, is that because Kyle Juszczyk plays an obscene amount of snaps as a fullback, right? Like 50% of the snaps. That means that, when he does get in that chair, the targets are so highly consolidated. Because whoever for the short term, it could even present, if they don't move on from Ayuk or Debo to start the year, it could present a buy low window as him being the guy that might have to come out for the fullback at times. Then you can sneak in and get him after the fact. But when you do get into one of those chairs, you're an every down player with a player playing half the snaps that garners next to no targets, which is Trey Bone for fantasy football. That's what we want to see. We want to see as many guys on the field, as many Nick Boyles and Patrick Ricards as you can stick on the field as possible, because it means the ball is going to our guys. So when he does get that role, it's going to be
1,000%. Yeah, so I'm very bullish on him. Some of those other guys, not quite as bullish on. I did like the landing spot for Roman Wilson going to Pittsburgh. He's going to step in. He's going to start right away. That's a very good player. I actually sent a bouquet of flowers. Like when someone, a loved one has passed away or a tragedy's happened, you like to, you send something and condolences. I sent that to the Broncos facility to give to Troy Franklin. I said, Troy, I know you've been soldiering through playing with Bo Nix. And I said, I'm so sorry, pal.
You sent him like an edible arrangement, right?
I sent him an edible arrangement.
A little fruit basket to cry into.
Yeah, exactly. And on one of it was a screen. It's like, I know you've been eating a lot of these screens over screen. Get ready to eat some more screens here in the next couple of years. But that's what I would say on those guys. My feelings about Polk. I won't get into that again.
Yeah. You already killed him, dude. And again, there's some scary stuff in there, like Xavier Legette, not just late breakout, but we're talking like he did nothing. 197 yards his best season until that last season. So there's some scary names in there. I like the way you went there. And again, if we're gonna give JJ McCarthy a pass because they won every single game and went undefeated, and you can't go more undefeated than that. And Blake Coleman 58 touchdowns, and if you're going to give JJ McCarthy a pass, then we give Roman Wilson a pass. And I kind of pointed out that Nico Collins, he didn't even crack 750 yards in Michigan because that's what Michigan does. So, and look at Nico Collins, laser show, right? So I'm not too worried about it. Okay, let's get into my neck of the woods. And I got to ask you here, Brock Bowers, obviously, we love him. That's our boy, right?
Yeah.
But he's gone, right? And I'll give you access to every tight end available. Our guy Gene Bell didn't quite get the draft cap, but he did land with the Patriots. Maybe they'll guess how many screens the Patriots called last year for tight ends? Tight end screens to any of the tight ends.
Was it more or less a Bo next year?
It's exactly none.
Oh, none? So I guess a little bit less.
a little bit less. It was exactly 0. Okay. But Alex Van Pelt called the second most over 21 last year for the Browns. So maybe a little more tight end screen action into it. Just Mike Gesicki's agent needs to be fired out of a can and into the sun. or like he's complaining about snaps in Buffalo. Somehow ends up in a spot where they use him less and don't throw him a screen, not one. So. And they try to have him block Max Crosby on the last play of a game, leading to a game-ending safety, which I really appreciated. So, yeah. But anyway, let's say you can have any tight end you want. We're talking Ben Sinnott, Jadavion Sanders, Jaheim Bell. I'm sure you're not going to go for Tip Ryman, who went as the third tight end. But, there's plenty of guys out there. Theo Johnson got a decent landing spot. Eric All. I know Debro loving Eric All over there. So, yeah, anybody you want. If you got to take one, who are you going to go with?
Yeah, Theo Johnson, the second coming of Albert O from Missouri a couple years ago. They were the Spider-Man gifts, and right. the Chiefs, generally such a good drafting organization, they decided to take a pick off with Jarrett Wiley. That kid. Good luck, Chiefs. That kid's not good.
Brandon Huffman. I was like, because he warned us about Darnell Washington. He was like, look. When he was 16 years old, we were trying to tell him to play offensive tackle. That's his meal ticket in the NFL. We were basically telling him play offensive tackle or work at a car wash, and he warned us there. And I said, hey, you warned us on Darnell Washington. Can you give me a name that might go that route? And he's before the draft, the one player he said was Jared Wiley. So I had already
he's not good. At least Darnell Washington can block. Right. The Chiefs would have to explain to me what they believe that Jared Wiley could do, but I digress. As far as this question, right? it would be Ben. Well, let me say this with some. I'll put a little wrinkle in there. Ben Sinnott, the short term floor dash ceiling combination for sure is my answer to this question. But then my second one with the shoot the moon on the higher upside and just. It's not even shoot the moon. The third tight end I would take off the board is pretty clear. It would be Eric All. And Eric All would be if you were okay. I was wording that wrong from the get. If you wanted to shoot for upside as opposed to the much safer guy, I would not be opposed to you considering Eric All against Sinnott. The other guys, I could take them or leave them. That would be the consideration for me. I think Sennett's a stud. Sinnott, he was the bang the table guy. Debro and I, we were going nuts about him the entire process. From last year, I was going nuts about Sam Laporta. They said, oh, he's a third round guy and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, he's not. Right. Sorry, that's his agent calling right now. Yes, sir, you owe me a cut. And then Ben Sinnott ends up going in the exact same slot that I had him on my board. I think it was 54th, but he's a tackle breaker. Ben Sinnott, when he gets the ball in his hands, akin to a Sam Laporta, the same physical package, same athletic profile. And the thing that I like about him as well, receiving translated into the NFL, is he got most of his usage or a lot of the damage he did. It was between the 10 to 19 yard sector between the hashes. We talk a lot about that as being the money zone with regards to talking about the quarterback prospects during the process of like, this is a thing that translates to the NFL because this is something the NFL really values. We so rarely talk about it with receivers or tight ends. Ben Sinnott was a killer in that sector between yeah. And then so he gets it there, metrics on the usage there, and then he becomes the tackle breaking berserker upfield. Also, for whatever it's worth, was one of the best blocking tight ends in this class as well. So that with him, and then Eric All, he's the upside guy. The only guy who has more upside as a receiver, as a fantasy asset for this position group for fantasy guys out there is Brock Bowers than Eric All. Eric, I said this in my write-up before the draft, he would have been my tight end 2 with a bullet if he did not have the injury concerns. It's the only thing lingering around that. He had the deal at Michigan where he had to leave. He had the weird season-ending surgery.
Back surgery, right? His own words were life-changing back surgery that went successfully.
Yeah. That's what he says. Yeah. But then he comes back. He started week 1 for Iowa and he was great for the Hawkeyes at the beginning of the season, but then he tears his ACL. So it's, but like, he was playing really good.
It's great.
Yeah, and I looked into that. Look, they don't share the medicals on guys. They're black boxes for like no one gets into this stuff deeper than me. I think Coop, as you know, one of my frustrations is that medicals on some of these kids, they're black boxes. So I have to go. I have to start digging for quotes and going around it, and then start making situational assumptions. Here's what I can tell people about the back thing. That's the one that matters. ACL with the modern deal, whatever. He can be just fine off the ACL. The back thing, there was a disagreement between he and Michigan staff that season, and the disagreement was over whether to shut down the season and elect for this season-ending injury, which is what all ended up doing. You mentioned, he puts on Instagram and all that sort of stuff, and then he's able to come back. My supposition is if that thing was so debilitating, where it's something that could cut down your career, yada yada, would there have been a disagreement between the Michigan staff and him about, Eric, you don't need to shut down your season to do that. You can keep playing. Like, I don't think that would have been a thing. So like, do I know? No, nobody does. He's not going to put out his, he and his agents, they're not going to release the medical information on that. They're not going to give us a doctor's notes. But to me, it seems like that was a more minimal on that side of it. If you're reading,
he got drafted though. He got drafted. That's it. Like, he got taken. The same thing goes with Tajay Spears and these guys. Tajay Spears got drafted in the 3rd round. I don't care. Laiatu Latu, right? Jimmy Lake and his staff said that he should medically retire, right? And then he goes off the board as the number 1 defensive player drafted, right, Thor? So like once these guys get drafted, I take that stuff and I say, okay, you know what? It's no longer something that's going to bother me. Now, if he goes undrafted, like Sean Tucker did, or like Justin Ross did, now we turn around and we say, okay, this is scary. This is obviously scary and it's problematic. But if the team is going to clear this guy and draft him amongst the tight ends that are going in that range in the 4th round or so, then I'm in, man. Then I'm in. And I look at the stats. It's a small sample size of stats, but with that sample size, you had a guy that had the 2nd highest yards per route run behind Brock Bowers. He had a yards per route run against man that was like over 3, which is obviously insane for any position, right? The guy that, when you plug in the sample size into the Excel sheet, everything is great. So, and of course he transferred and started at the Iowa tight end factory, right?
That it sure did. Yeah. And he played different, for Iowa as an inline, and then at Michigan was the move around dude, and so like played at two different ones. So yeah, like it sort of wheels up with that in a position, obviously a great need for the Bengals that we've been advocating that they take for several seasons. So as long as Eric Gall's body doesn't betray him, it's wheels up for that kid from a fantasy perspective, for sure.
Yeah. Let me get you out of here. Here's what I'm going to do. I want you to tell me a little bit about Kamani Vidal. And then hit us with any sleepers you want to hit on quick, just as a taste for the show that you guys did over at Dynasty Pros and the articles that you have coming out. So give us a taste of the deep cuts, because we have Fantasy Love, we have some sickos, right? I've got guys that are doing, we had Charlene in the chat earlier was talking about a 32-team league. JB Barry has a 32-team IDP league. One of my guys just did an insane startup draft that was like 50 rounds or something like that. So hit us with a little Kamani, and then hit us with anybody else that you want, and plug what you got going on.
For sure. Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah. And yeah, I sorry, I got to get running. I got to get across town, meet up with Paul Charchi, and we're doing something on the class for Fantasy Football Weekly. So I appreciate
it. Yeah. Get your takes out and get out of here, man. Tell Paul it's
as far as Kamani Vidal, Coop, we were talking about this. I love that kid, Kamani Vidal. I loved his game, loved watching him at Troy. He was the bell cow of that offense the past several years. as the runner. They hadn't used him as much as the receiver, but they kept him on the field. It was just the constitution of their offense. They had their own version of a Mickey Mouse offense, where it's Kamani runs, and then they would throw short stuff outside the hashes, and this offense that they ran. Kamani Vidal would be the pass protector in it, and it turns out he's one of the best, and worked his way up to become the best probably pass protector in this class at his position. But as far as what we're here to talk about topically, him as a runner, he got slept on in that facet. He comes into the process. People thought he was a bum athlete. It's 85th, 86th percentile size adjusted athlete that he tested at the pre-draft process in the exact same physical package, interestingly enough, as Blake Corum. They're like the same size, the same height, the same weight, whatever. Blake Corum ends up, of course, going in the third round to the crosstown rival, Sean McVay over there. And Jim Harbaugh's like, whatever. There's a kid who's in he comes off the same assembly line who happens to be a better athlete than him. They run slightly different, but I will say Kamani Vidal is the better pass protector. Blake Corum's more with the spinning bowling ball type, where it's like the break on the lane, if I'm to extend that metaphor. It's the agility, he runs with the tempo, and then it's, when he sees his lane, he gets in there at correct timing, and then he's trying to do the agility, different stuff like that, make you miss, and then run through the arm tackles. Kamani Vidal, it's more like, to use the bowling ball thing, Kamani Vidal's agents now is calling me.
It is good. You're making a lot of money. You're making a lot of money on the circuit today.
He's more like throwing the bowling ball at the lane. He just shoots out of there. It's an arrow is Kamani Vidal, and he presents like a problem.
He's your buddy that just looks at the miles per hour thing on the top of the bowling lane, right? Like he's just trying to throw it as hard as he can and see if he can get that number cranked up.
Yeah, right? It's with these bowling ball guys, it's usually that agility thing and the tempo thing and like these sorts of different things. But like with Vidal, it's he just shoots out there, the acceleration, and he gets through that hole so quick. He hides behind the line because he's so short. Now he's through there slap dang quick, going that north south, and his speed is better than people gave him credit for, as he proved at the NFL Combine. So I really like that. And then the fit with the Chargers, what more could you ask for? To me, that thing is wide open. They have Dobbins and they have Edwards ahead of him. Kamani Vidal is the exact type of running back that Jim Harbaugh always looks for. I put this on Twitter right after he got drafted. I expect him to upset J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards to start as a rookie for that team. He is your rookie fantasy sleeper for me, is Kamani Vidal. I think that kid is really, really good. The last one that I'll go even deeper on this one for my last one out the door is Jalen Coker. Jalen Coker, it's a crime that he did not get drafted. That kid, I think he was late fourth, early fifth on my board. His ball skills are insane. That kid, amazing ball skills. He's got the late hands thing, which I always love, like down the field. You're not getting a beat on when that ball's coming. If you're the guy defending him, catches it outside of his frame, doesn't drop anything. I saw ones where the dude was hanging on his arm, like for 5-6 yards heading into the end zone. And then he would just, like, I'm not talking just tugging on it. I'm talking literally holding onto his arm. Like, you're not catching this ball. And he's like, no, actually I am. I love the ball skills. He doesn't have the deep wheels as far as like the traditional burner, but he's very bursty. He ran like the 4.55, 4.56, something like that. But interestingly enough, at the exact same 10-yard split as Mr. A.D. Mitchell. So they get off the line the exact same way, in terms of that. The downfield stuff, maybe not so much, but I project him as a possession receiver in the NFL. Jalen Coker absolutely is making the roster for Carolina coming out of camp. Their receivers outside of their starting lineup stink. Jonathan Mingo, we'll see what you got here, but I was saying this on Twitter last night. There was not a big discrepancy on my board between where I had Jonathan Mingo last year, where I had Jalen Coker this year. But, it was like a 40-50 spot difference. So Jalen Coker's coming for Jonathan Mingo, but the other dudes, you can see yourselves out the door. I would already have Jalen Coker number 5 on that depth chart. So that's more of a long-term thing. He ain't going to come into play this year, but the Dynasty guys out there, that is your stash. And then as far as me, you can find me on Twitter at ThorKU. You can find our NFL draft stuff at Fantasy Pros. Going to be my draft grades came out, a couple days ago, NFC grades. AFC grades, and then my UDFA class rankings, one of my favorite things to do, will be coming out early next week. We have started the process of stacking the classes and doing the metrics on that. So I already have that done. Just got to get into the write-ups, and we'll be doing that over the weekend. So excited to put that out. Was excited to talk to you today, Coop. Appreciate you.
You're the man, my dude. I appreciate you coming in. And I'll tell you, folks, you probably already following him, but follow him on Twitter at ThorKU. All year long, you get all these takes and they come all together. And we're just scratching the surface. He's going to get into the UDFA. So check out his stuff over at Fantasy Pros. And the last thing I just want to remind folks, we got our rookie rankings up at fantasyalarm.com right now for our members for your rookie drafts. We also have our best ball cheat sheet. Again, members can get that, or you can buy it as a standalone product. If you just want to go in, hit the QR code there on the screen. The link is in the description. You can get that. We're ranking 240 players, both in a grid and also in the rankings. We've got rookies, sleepers, busts, you name it. So get that now. I updated it after the draft, painstakingly by hand, all by myself yesterday, and it's going to be updated all year long. So get in and get set up with that. Between Thor and his UDFAs and going crazy deep over there, and our best ball guides and everything, you are going to dominate, get paid. I think Underdog Best Ball Mania is out, and $15 million worth of prizes this year. $15 million. I think that's what it is, right, Thor?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so get in, get set up with that. But we got to get you out of here. Say what up to Paul for me. Thank you guys in the chat. Thank you, John and Pemba, for producing today behind the glass. And we are out of here.